Welcome back to the channel. We've got one of the greatest Punisher writers in the history of the world's Mike Baron with us. Most people, when they think of the Punisher, they think of Mike Baron, they think of Chuck Dixon, they also think of Garth Ennis. And obviously, there have been some things happening with the Punisher lately. Welcome to the channel, Mike. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, sir. It's a delight to be here.
So we did talk about what Jason Aaron and Marvel Comics were going to do to the Punisher. We knew they were changing the logo. They found the character in the logo problematic because it's associated with people that they don't like. Right. So Jason Aaron basically went through and systematically destroyed the Punisher. First, he changes his origin to where he was a serial killer as a child. And then he changes his origin when he returns from Vietnam. He's a bad father. He's a bad husband. His wife is scared of him. He's not really a doting father or husband and any of that stuff, taking away a lot of the core key aspects of the character. And finally, last week, we obviously got Punisher number 12 from Jason Aaron, where it was the coup de grace. His wife has been resurrected. She was going to divorce him the whole time. The Avengers basically chastised him, dressed him down, said that your fight was never worthy of fighting. Now that your wife is here and she was scared of you the whole time, you were never on a crusade of justice or revenge or anything like that. You were just a serial killer the whole time, basically destroying the character in whole cloth. As one of the writers that's been so additive to the Punisher, what was your reaction to what happened?
Well, I have to say I haven't read those books, so I really can't comment on the story specifically. What I know about them has been what I've read in the comic book press and what people have been saying on social media. And all I can say is that not my version of the Punisher, and it's obviously not the Punisher that the fans of the character want to see. The Punisher is a very simple character. It's a straight crime comic. And when I wrote The Punisher from issue number 1 through 65, there were no space stations, superheroes, horror, or time travel, except toward the end when I had new editor. And the new editor was a gimmick guy. And I'm not saying he was wrong, but he asked me to write certain stories, such as when Punisher turned black. And I did. That's one of the most controversial runs we had. And I'm happy to show you a video from that because I think we pulled it off. Black Like Me. There's a book about Black Like Me, and it's a true story about a man who wanted to experience, a white man, wanted to experience life in America as a black man in the 60s. So he took a drug which darkened his skin, and he wrote a book about it, and it's a real eye-opener. It's one of the first books about white people delving into black culture to experience it seriously. And he really did. And this is not the same as modern white people claiming to be black to enjoy special privileges, like Rachel Dolezal, for example.
So when you went into to start writing The Punisher, you were so additive to the character. What do you think the mindset for maybe the modern writer? And basically, compared to a lot of modern writers, Jason Aaron actually can write. Like he can lay out a concept, he can execute the story, whatever. But he just tends to be really destructive. Like, what did you see a sea change within comic books where the creators would come in, and when they got on a character, obviously they hadn't really done much with, they had to change the character whole cloth, maybe for some ownership, or maybe they thought the character was problematic to begin with?
Well, I have to say I read very few modern corporate comics. Every once in a while, I'll dip in to see what's going on. A couple of years ago, I bought a new Captain America by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I bought a new Master of Kung Fu, a title I've always liked, and I read them. And the art was good, but they contain no entertainment value, in my opinion, because the writer does not know how to engage the reader. The most important question in fiction is what happens next, and the reader has to care before he turns the page. Well, how do you make the reader care? There are an infinite number of ways. I'm just going to lay down 3. Number 1, fascinating character, Sherlock Holmes. Number 2, fascinating situation, Jurassic Park. And number 3, a seductive narrative voice, which is harder to pull off in comics than it is in straight prose, but a number of writers have managed to do it. I'm thinking of Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman. So I'm aware of the changes that are going on because they kick up such a fuss out of all proportion to their circulation. I've always said this about comics. Comics attract attention way out of proportion to their simple physical existence. Which is just words and pictures on paper. And the reason I think is that comics are universal. Anybody can enjoy a comic, even a comic in a foreign language if the art is good. I know I have. But when you get a comic where words and pictures click together and everything works in construction of the story, and you forget that you're reading a comic because you enter into the story so thoroughly, then any interruption will irritate you. Then you know that you're reading a great comic book.
I think one of the things that I'm noticing with a lot of modern writers is they kind of fixate on what they don't like about the character, and they don't really realize, let's take a Die Hard, for example. Very fantastical story. Everyone loves Bruce Willis of Die Hard, his character in there. And yes, he's in Nakatomi Plaza, and there's a terrorist attack going on, and his wife is in danger and all that stuff. And that's the fantastical element that you're talking about within the story. But at the heart of it, like, you can really relate to that character because he's just a guy that's trying to keep his family together and make things right with his wife. That's the heart of the story. And I think that's why people can relate to a Punisher, to where you've seen things happen to a family member and you wish you could take the gloves off and do something about it right then and right there, and not have to worry about the repercussions of it. And you would like to maybe get some revenge. And at the heart of him, the Punisher is a good character. He loved his family. He loved his children. And the traumatic event of when his wife and child were taken away from him completely unjustly, he goes out there and takes justice into his own hands. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. But all of a sudden, the logo is on a police car, or maybe it's associated with some military members now. And now all of a sudden, being in the police or being a military member makes you like a white supremacist somehow. And all of a sudden, that just becomes toxic. And they get so fixated on that they forget at the heart of the character, you know, the Punisher is a good character. Yes, there are problematic elements. He is taking justice into his own hands, but he is driven by something that everyone can relate to.
Well, the vigilante holds a special place in American history in the popular imagination because the West was settled by vigilantes. And by that, I mean, when settlers or soldiers or explorers headed west, there was no law with them. There was no police force. There was what they could seize for themselves and what they could create. And there were a lot of bad vigilantes. They executed innocent people right and left. There were a lot of good vigilantes. Wyatt Earp was a vigilante. Kit Carson was a vigilante. And they had to be because they were the forward thrust of civilization. There was no civilization until they got there. And by civilization, I mean Western civilization and the idea of democracy and republic and representative government. And sometimes it wasn't until years or decades after they had established a town that they got around to appointing a sheriff and creating a police force. If they wanted law and order, they had to do it themselves. I remember when Death Wish came out. And by the way, Death Wish is the exact same origin as Punisher. In that architect Paul Kersey was away when his family was slaughtered by maniacs, one of whom is played by Jeff Goldblum. And because of that, he goes on a crusade against the thugs that permeate the lower bowels of New York City, especially in the subways. Well, what's changed? It's only gotten worse. And now you have a vigilante like Daniel Penny, who saw a maniac threatening people, and he took him down and didn't mean to kill him. But, you know, there have been a lot of interviews with people who were on that subway, and they all say the same thing. They were terrified, and they were grateful when Penny stepped in. I'm not going to get into the middle of that argument. I'd rather stick to vigilantes in fiction. Dirty Harry.
John Wick. Everyone loves John Wick. Why isn't he problematic? He literally killed 100 people over a puppy. That's not a wife and the kids.
Well, one thing is because that film was produced with the purpose of entertaining people, and that's the number one failure in so much popular culture today is that people have forgotten, at least producers and creators have forgotten why people go to movies or read comic books. They want to be entertained. They want to be drawn out of their own life and enter into an adventure that's so compelling they don't want to be interrupted. And I never lose sight of that fact. My first rule of entertainment of writing is it's my job to entertain. And I make sure that any comic I do is wildly entertaining. I try not to waste a single picture or a single word. Every picture and word has to advance the story, and it has to be interesting. There can't be any dull stretches. And because of that, there are no lectures. You know, Samuel Goldwyn said, if you want to deliver a message, call Western Union.
Exactly. It's so much better to show rather than tell. And so much about modern comic books is just tell, almost speaking down to the audience, and rather than allowing them to come up to their own conclusion about the situation on who was right and who was wrong. And obviously, in a lot of these things with Superman and Lex Luthor, obviously Superman's right. Lex Luthor is the epitome of evil. But I think that everybody wants to ground everything so much in reality anymore that we do lose that essence of entertainment, the escapism, to where, this world isn't that great. I love my wife and family, but there's a lot of problems out there. And I see that in the news, and I discover that when I go out every day. When I open a comic book, I want to be taken away and go into another world that has other problems that are so much bigger than ours. And it's great that we have these heroes that are able to take care of them. But you get this grounded character like Punisher, and everyone ends up using him or even abusing him, I guess, at some points, which we just saw, to their own agenda, to get across their own point of view, rather than talking about things from Frank Castle's point of view, which has obviously been popular because he's one of the few Marvel characters that you can have, an ongoing solo title, and he can carry it basically for years at a time.
The second rule of storytelling is show, don't tell. And that means that any information you can give to the reader that advances the story visually, you should. This is especially true of comics, but it's also true of films in particular. And you save your words for characterization. Occasionally, you'll use words to advance the plot. But if it can be done in the right way, when I think of show, don't tell, I often think of the beginning of Better Call Saul, because most of those episodes began with a silent segment where the camera is just moving and it's showing you stuff, and you think, what's going on here? What's the point of this? Like we're following Mike Ehrmantraut pulling up at a factory and opening somebody else's locker and stealing their ID. And then you see him using that ID to get into the factory, and you say, oh, I get it now. Another thing to remember about this story is that the reader wants to see good rewarded and evil punished. John Gardner wrote a book explaining this. It's called On Moral Fiction, and I recommend it highly because it reaffirms a sense of order and justice in the world, which sometimes we have to impose ourselves. And that's what the vigilante is all about. I'm not a vigilante, I'm just a writer. But I know what makes for a compelling story.
That's kind of the best thing about all this. Yes, Marvel pulled an enormous BS move with what they've done with Punisher. And in my opinion, they've misused Punisher for quite some time now. But the good thing is you can go out there and you can create your own version of Punisher. I know my friend H.H. German has done that with Here Comes Calico. You've done that with Private American. I know H.H. German has spoken to me behind the scenes specifically about how you've mentored him and helped him develop that character specifically to fill this niche because we know Marvel can't do it anymore.
H.H.'s theme is animal cruelty. And there are a lot of people touching on that these days. In fact, I just finished a graphic novel about that very subject. It was a commission. I didn't think it up. But H.H., I admire his guts. He does a couple of things. One is he choreographs his fights very carefully, which I am for. People do not want to see a big fist waving in the foreground and 4 sets of feet flying off the panel in all directions, which used to be a staple of artists like Jack Kirby, for example. I love Jack Kirby, but he didn't choreograph his fights. He drew them to have the maximum impact, and each panel is like a poster. But I like to show a fight unfold in realistic and dynamic terms so you can see the technique being used and how it works.
So talking about like Private America and Here Comes Calico, that's the one good thing is people can actually have balls. You don't need to have Marvel to have a character like this. I know you created Private America specifically to fill the void of the Punisher.
That's right. I asked myself, what would Punisher be doing today? And it seemed obvious to me that he would be down on the southern border trying to intercept people traffickers, fentanyl smugglers, and terrorists who were just pouring across unchecked and then being flown all over the country in the dead of night. Now, a child, 10 or 20 years ago, any child would tell you that no organism, neither a single cell nor a nation, can survive without controlling its borders. But now this new regime has taken over. They refuse to recognize what's going on. They're destroying the country. They're bringing these people in for all sorts of reasons that you notice. None of these invaders are tested for drugs. And every day that goes on, you hear about Border Patrol apprehends a known terrorist who had been deported previously 5 times. Also, fentanyl deaths are up to 100,000 a year. Where's that fentanyl coming from? It's coming from Mexico. And before that, it's coming from China. They're doing that deliberately to destroy the United States so they can take over. And, but when I put this idea out there, I was attacked as a racist. I mean, you know about the daily.
You know what's crazy is Marvel's already done that story with Garth Ennis and Punisher.
I have read a little of Garth's Punisher. I didn't read that one.
Yeah, he put him down on the southern border and he started taking out people traffickers, child traffickers, and stuff like that. It makes complete sense for the character. That's justice. That's going out there and looking out for families and children and stuff like that. That's part of the Punisher's, his motivation. That's part of his mission.
I have to point out that the Punisher or the Private American just does not pick on innocent people. Well, not so innocent. I mean, they all enter the country illegally because they've been invited. I can't blame them. If I were living in Nigeria or Venezuela and I had the promise of a better life, I'd do anything I could to get here too. I don't blame them. I blame the people who removed all barriers and who are opening the doors. And they're doing it for a couple of reasons. 1, cheap labor, and 2, to replace an electorate that won't vote for them with an electorate that will, because their welfare will depend on it. They get free phones, they get free health care, they're being put up in 5-star hotels. What's not to like? Private American, by the way, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive, so much so that I've already begun a second issue. If people are interested in getting it, go to theprivateamerican.com, theprivateamerican.com, and the book is up there. It's in demand. It will be on sale in perpetuity. I'm going to put up my own shop later this year, and it will be on sale there as well, as long as the other things I'm offering. I did 2 books because they spoke to me. I always say I don't choose my stories choose me. And before Private American, I did Thin Blue Line, and it was a story about 2 police officers trying to survive a night of riots. Well, you would have think that I was publishing the works of Aleister Crowley or something. I was attacked over that. We sent it to every major publisher. We knew one would accept it. No one would accept it. But some of the responses we got were, fuck you, fuck the police. And these are major publishers.
The good news is you don't have to work for Marvel. You don't have to work for DC. You don't have to get published through Image Comics to get your voice out there, to get your stories out there, and actually go out there and connect with people. I believe you have a campaign going on right now. If people want to support more Mike Baron comics, a lot of people probably remember you from writing Star Wars, obviously Punisher, Flash, and so many of the other great characters out there. But you haven't stopped. You've got Florida Man, and you're still continuing your great work.
Well, thank you. Florida Man's only purpose is to make you laugh, and it will make you laugh. And if you want to go to floridamancomics.com, the new project is a supernatural Western that's illustrated by Pat Broderick. And Pat's an old school liberal, and we work together just fine. He's not a crazy person. And this is the greatest work of his career. It's just stunning, the detail that he did. It came about because I said to Pat, what do you want to draw? And he said, I would like to draw a supernatural Western. And that's where it came from. And it's just magnificent. Pat doesn't just draw the figures up front and neglect the background. He puts in the middle ground and the horizon as well. I sent you a couple of pages in black and white, and I think some of them show what I mean. The detail he crams into each page is just astonishing. And this is why we're going to offer an oversized black and white version, like we did with Thin Blue Line. And Thin Blue Line is available too at thinbluelinecomics.com if anybody is interested. But Bronze Star is a story whose only purpose is to entertain you, and it's wildly entertaining. These two books I did that proved to be controversial, I did them because I felt I had to do them. But my first goal, as always, is to entertain. And both those books, Thin Blue Line and Private American, are wildly entertaining. Ask anyone who's read them. However, from here on out, the books that I'm working on have no political agenda. There's no room for leftists to attack them unless they're insane. But of course, I mean, that's going to happen because after Bronze Star, we're doing the next Florida Man graphic novel. In fact, it's completely illustrated. It's funnier in hell. It's funnier than the first one. And then after that, we're doing a Nexus graphic novel that's being illustrated by Kelsey Shannon. I can't wait for people to see that. And then after that, we're doing Sherlock Holmes meets Captain Nemo, and Richard Bonk is illustrating that, and the art for that is just mind-blowing.
I got to ask you, because a lot of people are going to wonder this, are we going to get more Badger?
Yes, I do have plans to do a Badger graphic novel. In fact, it's 98% written. I just have to add a few pages. I have a terrific artist lined up, Geraldo Borges. We're going to crowdfund it. But I'm leery of running more than one crowdfunder at a time. I have friends who do, and they're very successful. And I'm not there yet. I can only run one crowdfunder at a time.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, and I wouldn't be able to do it without Chris Brawley. He runs my crowdfunders. He's a genius. He's responsible for those videos you see, like the Bronze Star video.
If you're a fan of Mike Baron, he's not going anywhere. He's got about 5 or 6 projects lined up. Another graphic novel of Badgers lined up. We got Florida Man. We've got more projects. Bronze Star is funding right now on Indiegogo, correct?
No, it's on Kickstarter. And it's also on Fund My Comic. And if you want it, go to Fund My Comic. And you can go there just by typing in bronzestarcomic.com. It'll take you straight to Fund My Comic.
That is awesome. I do want to say thank you very much to Mike Baron for showing up, talking about the Punisher, talking about some of the current state of comic books and why he's not going away, and he doesn't need Marvel and DC to be successful anymore.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about this world is this opening up of an alternative when people are crowdfunding their own books. A lot of people are doing it. A lot of people are calling themselves Comicsgate and putting out their own books. But be mindful of Sturgeon's law. Theodore Sturgeon was a science fiction writer, and his law was 90% of everything is crap. And that's true across the board. But some of these books being put out by my friends like Graham Nolan or Art Thiebaud or Ethan Van Sciver, they're outstanding. The story is outstanding and the art is outstanding. And that's why people are supporting them.
Well over a year ago, I was talking about Jason Aaron's Punisher, obviously ruining a character that Mike Baron put so much work in perfecting, making the best character Marvel could possibly have. And Jason Aaron destroyed it basically on issue number 2. I talked all about it right here. Destroyed the origin of the Punisher. That was goal number 1 until he took him out permanently. If you haven't seen this video, definitely check it out right now. There's also a link in the video description.